It started with the biggest pipe bomb the FBI had ever seen.
There is a bomb in Centennial Park. You have 30 minutes.
It ended in a dumpster after the largest manhunt in American history.
My knees knocked so hard that I was about to answer them. That's how nervous I was.
Eric Rudolph and the rise of anger.
Domestic terrorism has been metastasizing across the country for a long time now.
True story, true crime, true consequences for us all.
American Shrapnel, from award-winning journalists Becca Andrews and John Archibald, two-time winner of the Pulitzer Prize. Now available wherever you get your podcasts.
As a scientist, I can tell you that Sundays are only 24 hours long. But with NFL Sunday Ticket and YouTube TV, you get every game every Sunday all in one place. That's upwards of 30 hours of NFL in one day. How can there be 30 hours in 24 hours, you ask? I have a theory. Magic. New users get NFL Sunday Ticket for 8 payments of $34.50 per month. Sign up at NFLSundayTicket.com. Local and national games on YouTube TV. NFL Sunday Ticket for out-of-market games excludes digital-only games and commercial use. Terms and embargoes apply. Availability varies.
Buckeye Talk is about to begin. Hey, 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 come on in.
Welcome back to Buckeye Talk. I'm Stephen Means, and that's Stefan Krajisnik, and this is your Leave No Doubt pod. Again, this is the pod where every week we come on to answer the question, did Ohio State leave no doubt against X opponent? Well, you can't really leave doubt or have doubt when you don't play anybody. And so what it did do, though, is it gave us an opportunity to look around the rest of the country, and especially look around the Big Ten, because Big Ten play was officially in full swing last week, and there weren't as many bangers as there's going to be this weekend, and we'll talk about that later this week when we do our live show on Wednesday. Check that out on our YouTube channel, Buckeye Talk. It's YouTube/Buckeye Talk. We're going to go live every Wednesday going forward at noon, and we'll talk big. It's essentially our big picture pod every week is going to turn into that live pod. So if you can't join us, it'll still be up on Thursday mornings in your podcast feed. But we're trying to think out where we're trying some live shows more often than not, instead of it just being a little bit more sporadic. But this weekend, it gave us a chance to tune into a couple of games that we think matter, both from Ohio State is going to play one of these teams later down the road, who might win the Big Ten, how many teams the Big Ten might get into the college football playoff, but then also just kind of getting to know some things. And we're going to start with a game that I think everybody thought was going to be much more competitive than a 53-point blowout. And that's Indiana, who was number 19, against Illinois, who was number 9 at the time. That has since changed. Illinois is like 22 now, and Indiana 23, and Indiana is 11. I had Indiana at 5, and I had Illinois. I booted them. I don't think you can give up 63 points in a conference game when both teams are ranked and you still be ranked. But listen, that's the kind of the point here. I was going at it with some texters today, 614-350-3315 on Sunday evening, because you don't have to agree with me. But as long as your answer is, oh, you didn't watch games. No, I watched that game. Everybody watched that game. Stefan, you were at that game. At what point in the game did you realize, holy moly, this is getting out of hand very, very quickly? This is not what I thought I signed up for today.
Yeah, I'm sure some of the listeners can probably hear it in my voice that I was at a football game on Saturday. When Indiana went up 28-7, that was late in the first half, some point in the second quarter. Mm-hmm. And you knew with Kurt Signetti and his staff that they were not going to blow a 28-7 lead. Also, like, if you're watching that game, like, blowing the lead is not even coming through your mind because of just how dominant they were. So Indiana goes up 28-7, and Stephen, I was telling you right before we hopped on here, the second half just kind of became a party. Like 56,000 people in Bloomington were gathered at the same place to have the biggest party known to man in the second half of that football game. It was like, I don't want to call it a coronation. That Ohio State's second half against Notre Dame was probably more of a coronation, right? Because that's a national title game, and you can kind of tell which way it's going. Whereas for Indiana, the Michigan game last year, I believe that was the game right before Indiana came to Ohio State. So they hosted Michigan. They won that game. They improved to 10-0, and you knew at that point, like, even if they lose at Ohio State, they'll beat Purdue, and at 11-1, they're probably going to be in the college football playoff. Obviously, there were still some debates then, but the way that the rankings shook out, you could tell that Indiana team was going to make the playoff. A lot of that game was you're on edge. That Michigan team wasn't great. Indiana was, there was just kind of like a weird feel to that. It was almost like you better not lose this game. Whereas this Illinois game was being talked about as one of the best games in college football, right? And two programs trying to be, in the playoff conversation. And for that game to go the way it did with that crowd, I mean, 56,000 obviously is not a massive, venue, right? Like Indiana does not have a massive football stadium like Nebraska or Ohio State or Texas A&M or whatever. But like that place was, I've never seen it like that. I went to school at Indiana. I've never seen it like that. I'm sure there's Ohio State fans who have made the trip to games at Indiana and not seen it like that. And if you did see it like that, it's because the Ohio State fans made it like that. I remember the game was that Thursday night game in 2017 that they played where it was a packed house. And the joke for a while was that was Indiana's picture game because the photo of the stadium is what they used, in all their marketing stuff because everyone was wearing red. So it was like, oh, like packed house, like we can make it. But it was like, yeah, but when Dobbins was running all over the place, it got loud because there's a lot of Ohio State fans there. So Ohio State fans have probably seen, some of those trips and the way that crowd is. But it was, I mean, it's what college football is all about, right? Like the fan bases and a school like Indiana where football has been so bad for so long, putting 63. And another thing we were talking about right before we started recording, like, I think your initial reaction is like, oh, Cignetti ran it up on Bielema, but like Indiana was just getting long runs. Like they were trying to run clock in the second half, and then they broke a 40-yard touchdown run and a 31-yard touchdown run. And it's like, I mean, yeah, like you don't want to, do that to a conference opponent necessarily, run up the score on them, but it's not like they were like you were saying, like it's not like they were running trick plays or something like that to shove it in Bielema's face. So it was just crazy. And if we're talking, Ohio State specific and kind of just Big Ten football specific, that as fun as Indiana's, run last year was and everyone around college football getting hot and bothered about it, that there was a sense of, hey, they'll get on the field with Ohio State, they get on the field with Notre Dame, they're not going to be able to compete. I walk away from that Illinois game, like when Indiana goes to Penn State in a month or 2 months or whatever it is, like that Indiana team looked like they can compete with Penn State. That looked like a team that could compete when they go to Oregon. I was coming into the year, I was kind of nervous about Indiana playing next week at Iowa. And now I'm like, I could see Indiana going on the road and winning at Iowa. Like that looked like a team that wants to be part of the playoff conversation. And as of today, should be part of the playoff conversation. We'll see, how the season unfolds and health matters and all that kind of stuff. But like, if we're talking big picture, Big Ten, this Indiana team looks better than last year's. And I'd said that in the offseason when we did our Big Ten predictions that I thought Indiana was going to go 9-3, but have a better team this season than they did last year. And I think that's the case. Like this Indiana team, I think is just straight up good. I think Mendoza's an NFL level quarterback, and they're a team that's gonna compete with Penn State and Oregon. I think when they go on the road to play them.
Fernando Mendoza, 21 of 23, 267, and 5 touchdowns. We'll hold on to that number for right now for a question we'll do in the second part of this podcast. To your point, I mean, we're not that far removed from Ohio State going to Indiana in 2021, dropping 45 in the first half, right? We're not that far removed from that. We're not that far removed from, to the point you're making about the all red thing. I mean, that used to be like an extra home game for Ohio State because the drive is so easy for Ohio State fans living in Ohio to make, even if for whatever reason y'all can't figure out construction on that road from Ohio to Indiana.
It's done now. It's done. But my drive was so easy. It's done. I was like, I wish I had this when I was a student.
Yeah. How convenient that it's done when Ohio State doesn't have to go to Bloomington this year.
We're giving them the time to start construction again on something new now before we go there again.
Yeah. They're going to be like, just you wait. Get to Indianapolis and we'll have something brand new for you. I feel like last year when they came to Ohio State and they were undefeated, they were top 10 in the rankings because they were undefeated. And there weren't that many undefeated. In fact, I think it was them in Oregon at that point who were undefeated in college football. And it kind of turned into, it looks weird if a Power 4 team from it's not even Power 4, one of the Big Two, SEC Big Ten teams is undefeated. Regardless of how you feel about it, you can't have them outside of the rankings. And if they're not that good, eventually somebody will beat them. Maybe it'll be Michigan or maybe it'll be Ohio State. Maybe they'll do us a favor and go away. But they got the reasonable schedule that they didn't have to necessarily go away because you're right. One loss to Ohio State, who at that point had one loss to an undefeated team on the road. That's just not enough to kick you out of the college football playoff. I think this win validates its program because last year felt like you were a beneficiary of the moment and of your schedule. This time around, it feels a lot more like, okay, it's early in the season, right? It's not November. And so there was an element, I think, to both Illinois and Indiana in this week 3 game of contender versus pretender early in the year. And sure, Illinois is going to have a chance to bounce back. They're going to play USC this week in another ranked game, and let's see what they can do, which I think is a good thing. I think if Illinois was playing the bottom of the barrel with the Big Ten the next couple of weeks and this was sticking in the back of people's minds, I'm not sure they'd be able to recover from it no matter what they did the rest of the season. So I think it happening September 20th instead of October 20th, let alone November 20th, is a very different world to live in. But for Kirk Cignetti, who seemed very, I'll even say it, the way he handled the Ohio State game, the way he handled the Notre Dame game, I was starting to think he was a bit of a front runner. And getting a win like this against a top 10 team, I think you can start to wrap your head around the idea of, okay, maybe Indiana is here to stay. Now, Oregon on the roads coming up next year, real soon in a couple of weeks. November, that's a rough one, man. Penn State's got Ohio State and Indiana back-to-back weeks. I tweeted this out. I think Kirk Cignetti's going to beat James Franklin. I just think that game is going to turn into this is the exact type of game James Franklin loses.
I could see it. The thing you were saying about Cignetti, the front runner stuff, there were some Indiana fans who were thinking that when that game was either still tied or very early on, there was that 4th and 2 at midfield, and he sent out the punt unit, and then Illinois called a timeout. And maybe, I don't know if Bielema talked about it. Maybe Indiana was setting up to maybe do like a fake punt there, and that's why Bielema called a timeout. But him doing that timeout, Indiana fans use that as an opportunity to bully Cignetti into going for it. And there was a lot of people sitting around me who were like, dude, like he's going to do this again. Like why is he played scared? Why is he played scared or coaching scared? And then they go for it and they get it. And everyone knows how the rest of the game went. But that felt like a defining moment for Cignetti of like, hey, it's a top 20 game. Like you can still be aggressive.
Be you. No, regardless of who the opponent is, which is why I think you can be excited about what he might try to do at Oregon. Now, that's a different environment. You're on the road, so maybe in that situation you do punt, but this is the dude who his introductory to the world as an Indiana's head coach was, we're going to beat Ohio State, we're going to beat Michigan, we're better than everybody. All I do is win. No. And then you played one of these schools and you tuck tail. So to see him not tuck tail, good early sign. And you're going to play better teams with Oregon and Ohio and Penn State later on your schedule. And then let's see what happens after that. Illinois perspective of this. I think both you and I, and maybe even Andrew, were looking at that Illinois game as an intriguing back-to-back road games, right? And which team on Ohio State's schedule during this stretch of 3 road games and 4 games can catch Ohio State slipping the most? And I think we were both looking at it, Illinois as that. Does this change that math in your head? When you've seen what Ohio State has done through 3 games, and I think Washington's a good football team, so we'll see. They got to get through that. But Luke Altmaier was fine. He wasn't necessarily a difference maker. And speaking of people who are difference makers in this game, D'Angelo Pons is a dude. I want to apologize because I think I've gotten so wound up in, Jermaine Matthews looks amazing. Davison Igbinosun looks amazing. Devin Sanchez looks amazing. Who's the best cornerback in the Big Ten? D'Angelo Pons is the best cornerback in the Big Ten. So please don't ever allow me to have a conversation in my head of, who's the best cornerback in the Big Ten? It's the dude from Chaminade Madonna who goes to Indiana. It's him.
You can just pencil in Chaminade Madonna and you'll probably be right.
Yes. I'm watching. I'm like, man, I think I forgot he was still in college. That's what it was. I thought he went pro last year.
I remember we had a conversation in the offseason about Jermaine and Davison, and I think you had brought up the point, there's not a lot of great returning corners in the Big Ten. Could Jermaine be the best one? And we were going through the names, and I was like, D'Angelo Pons is back at Indiana. And you were like, okay, yeah, he's pretty good. I think this was a reminder of let's not forget his name again.
Yes. I think when you said it, it didn't register. Oh, yeah, he's back at Indiana this year. No, Steven, it's D'Angelo Pons. Don't ever forget that ever again. Illinois perspective, though. I mean, does this change the way you think that Ohio State-Illinois game might play out? Because Indiana is a very good football team. This is a way more talented football team than what Indiana is. Now, granted, it'll be in Champaign and not Columbus like this one was at Indiana, but still, I'm not going to say that Ohio State's going to drop 70 just because Indiana dropped 63, because some of these were explosive plays, right? 40-yard run, 31-yard run, 40-yard pass. But I I don't want to be overreactive, but if that game's not competitive, I'm not going to be shocked.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. You know, one thing I was watching closely going into the game and being there and watching it was the you know how Illinois secondary lined up with Indiana's receivers and how Illinois was able to do in the trenches. Those are two areas where Ohio State constantly dominates teams, and I think, and we'll see where Oregon is in this conversation. I think Indiana, outside of Ohio State, has the best group of receivers in the Big Ten, led by Elijah Surratt. I think it's a pretty good group. I would take Ohio State's number one. Then Oregon's in that conversation, but like I think Indiana might have the second best. And what they were able to do, the way that they were getting open against Illinois secondary. Now, granted, Illinois, their all Big Ten slot corner, his name escaping my mind, but all Big Ten slot corner was out. I don't think it's like a long-term thing. So like he might be back for that game against Ohio State, which makes somewhat of a difference. You know, Allmeyer was sacked 7 times. Illinois got injuries up front. You know, Cignetti had said post game, you know, you watch the Duke game. I mean, Duke turned it over, but he was like, you could see that there was areas where Duke was dominating against Illinois. And I remember like we were watching in the press box because that was right before the Grambling State game. And like the first half, Illinois did not look dominant against Duke. They pulled away in the second half, but the first half, it wasn't overly convincing. And the line of scrimmage is a big reason why. So I'm looking at this game and thinking to myself, well, Luke Altmyer is not as mobile as a guy like Damon Williams or even Parker Navarro, right? Like he's not as mobile, so he's going to be stuck in a pocket. It feels like Kenyatta Jackson and Caden Curry and Bo Atkinson and Caden McDonald are going to feast against that Illinois offensive line if it looks anything like it looked against Indiana. That's another area, too, where Ohio State has the best receivers. Indiana's probably second. And then if we want to talk defensive line, Indiana's in that conversation just because they're anchored by Mikael Kamara. And if that's what that Indiana defensive line did to Illinois' offensive line, prayers for Luke Altmyer because Ohio State's DNs are going to be coming. I mean, Arvell Reese could have 3 sacks in that game with how Illinois' offensive line was looking.
Yeah, I forgot Mikael Kamara. No, I didn't. I voted for him in Big Ten honors. Like I didn't forget that one. But they did. Indiana lost a decent ton on offense, but they did return some key players on both sides of the ball. In terms of the wide receiver thing, probably Ohio State, Indiana, Oregon. Those are probably the top 3 because Washington's Denzel Boston and a running back, so that can't be part of that conversation the same way. I would, if you wanted to lean, I've done this before, I would go Indiana number 2 just because Surratt. If you want to lean who I think might be better by the time these two teams play each other, I mean, DeCorian Moore looks like a stud, so I don't want to discount that. But yeah, if you're telling me that Arvell Reese doesn't have to worry about spying the quarterback the way he has the last 3 times, he'll have played a good quarterback by the time they play Illinois. He's probably like, great, I can just go sack the quarterback then. Cool. Is that but that also helps to your point. Kenyatta Jackson doesn't have a sack yet. CJ Hicks doesn't have a sack yet. Bo Atkinson and Caden Curry have sacks. They both, Bo Atkinson got his first last game, and Caden Curry's got 2 on the year. But if they don't have to spend 80% of their energy just being in stay contained, don't let this guy get out the pocket because all he wants to do is run, we can be on the aggressive end of it instead of on the containment end of it. Then what does that mean for Sonny and Arvell as well? What can you do with them when your defensive line doesn't have to be keep contained? Don't set the edge and don't let anything get loose. They can maybe be a little bit more aggressive in that one. They had 2 rushing yards. And you're right, Luke Altmyer got sacked 7 times, and so 9 carries for minus 27 yards. But the running backs weren't great either. Kevin Fegan had 5 carries for 18 yards. Khalil Valentine had 6 carries for 11 yards. Granted, they were down 28-7 before they could blink. But to me, that felt like the Ohio State-Michigan State game in 2021, where Kenneth Walker was a Heisman Trophy candidate at running back, and then Ohio State just jumped on him. So who cares that your running back is a Heisman Trophy caliber running back? You can't run the ball now because you're down 28-0. So if I'm Ryan Day and Julian Sand will have played Illinois and Minnesota Washington and Minnesota before we head to Champaign. So Sand's going to have all the confidence in the world. He'll have played a Big Ten road game. He'll have played a Big Ten home game. He'll have played a big game at home, and he has 2 other non-conference games under his belt. If I'm Ryan Day and Brian Hartline, I'm going, let that thing fly early and often and make Luke Altmyer have to be a hero, because Luke Altmyer had to be a hero, and he was 14 of 22 for 146 yards and a touchdown. Illinois doesn't scare me anymore, and I don't think I was ready to walk away from the Indiana game going, Illinois doesn't scare me. I thought worst case scenario, we'd walk away from that game and go, win or lose, whoever won or lost, I think we'd have respect for both teams. And this is how Ohio State might get attacked by Illinois when they play them on, October 11th. This is what that game might look like. Instead, I'm sitting here like, yeah, you don't scare me anymore. Because if these receivers did that to you, imagine what these receivers are about to do to you. So who's the bigger threat to Ohio State of its non-conference, of its non-scheduled Big Ten opponents? So this is Indiana, Oregon, or maybe even another. Of the teams who are not on Ohio State's schedule, who's maybe a bigger threat based on what we've seen from them so far? And I know Oregon's got a big one coming up against Penn State where we'll learn a lot more, but at least, they look pretty awesome per usual.
Yeah, I probably still lean Oregon just because I think they're better than Indiana in the trenches. So I still lean Oregon. Obviously, they've got dudes on the perimeter, and we know what Oregon's offense can do in terms of explosives. But up front, I trust Oregon still. So I'd probably lean them, but I didn't think that we're going to walk away from this game thinking that would even be a conversation, because that there is part of Indiana that's intriguing because they are so good in the secondary, their D-line is so good, and their receivers are so good where they could probably match up with Ohio State better than they did last year for obvious reasons. But I think I still lean Oregon. I like what they've got going on at quarterback, and you, like we were just talking about, the receiver play that they got. I think there's still a level of explosiveness to their offensive attack that could be scary if Ohio State had to play them. Because that's one thing we haven't really seen yet. And obviously Texas had a few plays here and there. We haven't seen a lot of teams try a lot of explosives or try for big plays against Ohio State just because they can't really match up. And I think that's what Washington will be an interesting test. How they handle Washington would kind of maybe tell me how they would match up with a team like Oregon.
My question is when I was trying to figure out the answer for myself was, because if they're going to play indoors in Lucas Oil Stadium, which essentially means if you got talent and speed, you can turn this into a track meet because you're not worried about the elements anymore. And which team do I think not only can keep up, but maybe even outpace them? And Oregon's got talent that can keep up with that, right? And as you mentioned, the trenches, Mateo Uyunglele might be the best defensive end in the Big Ten on a short list of like the 5 best defensive ends in college football right now. Michael Kamara I feel like Indiana right now is an Oregon light, where they're only because they don't even really have the advantage at quarterback. Because sure, Mendoza has more experience than Dante Moore does, but Dante Moore started a full season at UCLA for a year. So it's not like this is Dante Moore's first year starting. It's just his first year starting in a competent program where winning is actually on the table for him. But I think because Surratt versus Moore, you take Surratt now, but you might take Moore later. Mateo versus Michael, I think you take Mateo now, and you're definitely going to take him later. I think you can make the case for Mendoza or Dante Moore right now, which one you want to take, but you're probably going to take Dante Moore later. And that's just like the guys I can name off of the top of my head without deep diving into the rest of the roster. Well, okay, corner, I'm definitely taking D'Angelo Ponce. Like, again, best cornerback in the Big Ten. While Oregon does have a lot of young guys at corner, and even if you want to go DB in general, I'm taking D'Angelo Ponce over Dylan Thiemann. Just like outright, I think he's a better football player than Thiemann is right now. But because of the environment, Oregon's the bigger threat. But I would be intrigued by if Indiana gets there. If I covered Indiana, my first question is, what did you learn about the last time we played Ohio State, and how has that impacted the way you're approaching things now in terms of aggressiveness in your play calling, right? I almost feel like that loss to Ohio State was a lesson for Kirk Cignetti, the way that Ohio State losing to Michigan and then winning a national title while playing the polar opposite of how they played against Michigan can be a lesson for Ryan Day. So if they got back on the field with each other in Indianapolis, I know Day will have learned his lesson the week before and had to show what that is. But like, can Indiana show that like they've learned that you can't come into these games playing scared and playing tuck tail? You got to go out just as aggressive as you would go out with any other team. But okay, any other things you want to mention about your experience and what was, by God, easily the best possible experience you could have had as someone who went to Indiana, because you were at the game, they won by 53, and you didn't have to work.
Yeah, it doesn't get much better than that. And those who listen to Buckeye Talk know that I'm also a Bears fan, so my life has not had a lot of weekends like this one. I don't really do the whole winning of football games thing. I save that for work, apparently, because I win national titles, I guess, through work.
Yeah.
This was it was a blast, man. It was a blast. The college football rocks.
I'm happy you had that. You know what this also means, right? The Bears are going to rip your heart out one of these weeks, and Stefan's going to get on here miserable very soon.
Yep, can't wait. Last year's bye week was the Hail Mary against the Bears. A different tone of tone of this podcast.
Oh, that was a wonderful moment. I've never seen a more depressed sports fan than after that, because it's the settling in of, you got to pull it together, man, because we have to work now.
Yeah, let's
talk
Buckeyes.
Yeah. Okay, let's take a break, and then there are a few games this weekend that were interesting, but obviously the one that's most interesting to Ohio State is the Nebraska-Michigan game, and we'll get into that when we come back from the break.
This episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. Healthcare professionals can lead their careers with LinkedIn. Discover jobs by specialty, preferred shifts, and even desired salary. From mental health therapists to radiology technicians, it's now faster and easier for healthcare professionals to find the right fit. Learn more at linkedin.com/healthcare. Side effects may include faster job placement, improved work-life balance, and increased career satisfaction.
The Hilton sale is on. For 10 days only, you can save up to 20% on stays this fall and beyond. Don't wait. The sale ends September 29th. Book your stay and save at Hilton.com. Terms apply. Hilton, for the stay.
And we're back here on Buckeye Talk, the Leave No Doubt pod. It's Stephen Means and Stefan Krajisnik. This is where we have the conversations about, did Ohio State leave no doubt against X? Can't really do that when we're coming off of a bye. So now we're looking around the country to see who accomplished that mission. And I think Indiana very much accomplished that mission, while Illinois has probably left nothing but doubt for a team who came into the year with a lot of expectation, a lot of hype around them. They were a top 10 team in the country. I don't think they were top 10 in the preseason poll, but they were like top 15 in the preseason poll. And now they were top 10 going into this game. And what I do think was probably the biggest game for both of these teams in a long time, and Indiana showed up for the moment, Illinois didn't. Nebraska also had, which I think I said this to you guys, I think that this game this past weekend for Nebraska was probably the biggest game in Lincoln from a Big Ten perspective since the 2019 game when Ohio State went to Lincoln, coming off of what they had accomplished last year under Scott Frost, where they did come into Columbus and they didn't beat Ohio State, but Adrian Martinez at least put the fear of God into Ohio State. That game was a 4-quarter football game when it probably shouldn't be. Ohio State was also coming off of a loss to Purdue 2 weeks before. That was my first game on the beat. And this should have been Nebraska's coming out party in 2019 with Adrian Martinez as a second-year starter. They're a ranked team at that moment. Ohio State's got a brand new head coach, and this is his first really big game of the season. And Ohio State just kind of ran things the entire game. And we left that game thinking, okay, Ohio State's for real. And Nebraska, I don't want to say it set them back years, but it took them 4 years to get back on this stage. Where now you got Dylan Raiola, 5-star quarterback, who he started as a true freshman. Now he's in his second start. He's already got a semi-big game under his belt this year, the Cincinnati game, which was like a fake road game. And then you got Bryce Underwood coming off of the Oklahoma game, which you and I both agreed that he just was not put in the position to have a lot of success in this game. And so you're not really sure how much to take from that. He had 2 games since to figure some things out and gain some confidence. And now he comes into this game where I do feel like they let him loose a little bit more, and we learned a little bit more about Bryce Underwood. So I want to start with Bryce. What do you, now that we have a real idea of what type of threat Bryce Underwood as a true freshman might be, what do you think, what's your opinion and evaluation of him in terms of what it means for the Ohio State-Michigan game at the end of the regular season?
Well, I'm seeing a freshman quarterback who's getting better with each game and getting better with experience. And I think when you're talking about Ohio State-Michigan, that's obviously scary because he's going to have a ton of experience by the time those teams play each other. And I think Michigan's staff is learning more about Bryce Underwood and the ways that they could use him and ways not to use him and things like that. So I think Bryce Underwood, listen, I'm sure there were some people in the Michigan sphere who thought, he was going to come in and just be, a star from day one and be a Heisman level guy from day one. And that hasn't been the case, right? Like there's been bumps along the way. I don't think he was perfect by any stretch of imagination against Nebraska, but I'm seeing a young quarterback who's developing in real time. And whether we're talking about the 2025 matchup, we're kind of just talking about, the rivalry in general. I think Bryce Underwood's a guy who can give Ohio State some problems. I think his mobility and the things that, he can do with his legs makes him a tough guy to match up with. And I still got some questions about the arm, but again, it's a freshman quarterback who's learning how to, process 11-on-11 football for the first time at this high of a level, right? So there's been bumps along the way, and he hasn't looked like a immediate star based on, the rating and the money and all that. But I think this Nebraska game was a good sign for his development because he went into a tough environment and handled it well. And, I know that the final score was close, and that's fine. I mean, a Big Ten road win, I don't care what the margin of victory is. Like, you take it. But that said, they led the entire game. Like, it's not like they had to come back, or like they were pretty dominant for a team that only won by 3, relatively speaking. So, and Bryce Underwood was a big part of that. And then it kind of just Michigan as a whole, their defense is starting to impress me more than I think after their week 1 game against New Mexico. I was kind of like, let's see what happens. I think they're starting to come along a bit, and I think this Michigan team's coming into form.
Would you rather have Bo Jackson or Justin Haynes?
Ooh, probably Justice Haynes.
Would you rather have Bo Jackson or Justice Haynes by the time November 20th?
I think there's at least a conversation there.
Okay. Because I was having that 614-350-3315. A texter pointed that out of, we need to do better. Why don't we have Justice Haynes? This is the second time we lost. And it's a valid point to make. Justice Haynes left Alabama, and he's in the portal, and you're losing Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins. So I know I said that jokingly, but I'm dead. Like, that's a good question to ask. I mean, you did go get a transfer running back from West Virginia. How come you didn't just go get Alabama's a transfer running back, especially when the year before that you went and got 3 transfers from Alabama with Caleb Downs, who was his roommate at one point when they were at Alabama, Seth McLaughlin and Julian Sand, and 2 of those guys are still here starting, and the other one won the Remington Award for you last year. I think, though, and then my response to them was, that might not matter by November. If Bo Jackson is what we think he is, then maybe it doesn't matter, which is why I asked you the question that way. I think right now it's not a conversation. Justice Haynes is leading the Big Ten and rushing yards. On 66 carries, he's got 537 yards and 6 touchdowns. That's 134.3 yards per game, plus 9 catches for 29. It's not even a conversation. This is the best running back in the Big Ten. This might be the best running back in the country right now with the things he's doing with the ball in his. I mean, Oklahoma, Nebraska, you give me the ball coming out in the second half, I'm going yard. Like, that's just how he's doing things, right? So it's a good question of like, hey, how come you didn't go get that guy? But if you think Bo Jackson might be a dude, and then you get to November 29th, and you're like, I mean, there's not a wrong answer, then it's fine. I think Bryce Underwood is enough that Michigan can do what it did last year without feeling like it can only do. Because it's not like he's picking teams apart. 12 for 22 for 105 yards, 8 carries for 61 yards and a touchdown, and 37 of those yards came on the QB draws, which I think they're starting to do a lot more of that over the last 2 weeks of just running him up the middle because he's big and strong and he's fast. I mean, to be real with you, I think Dylan Raiola outplayed Bryce Underwood. 30 of 41, 308, and 3 touchdowns. Like, Dylan Raiola, Patrick Mahomes is on my screen right now playing the Giants, asking any of his weapons to just act like they're good at football. Just anybody be good at football so I can continue to be the best quarterback in the NFL. I think that the Patrick Mahomes cosplay has gotten so overbearing that I don't think we get a chance to truly appreciate Dylan Raiola is a quality quarterback. That's the first thing I learned from Nebraska. And the announcers were talking about it a little bit. I think his godfather is Matthew Stafford because his father played for the Lions. He won the Remington Award at Nebraska and then was a longtime Lions center when Matthew Stafford was there. And so they were talking about how his game actually mirrors Matthew Stafford a little bit more than it does Patrick Mahomes. It's just he looks like Patrick Mahomes. He's dressed like Patrick Mahomes, has the same hairstyle as Patrick Mahomes, wears Patrick Mahomes' numbers, and does all the celebrations and warm-up things that Patrick Mahomes does. So it's become so much of a, hey, how much do you love It's like Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan, where it's like, hey, how come you're stealing his entire identity? He's 30 for 41, 308 yards and 3 touchdowns, and his interception was a tip ball. I mean, he had a good day. But the combination of the Patrick Mahomes thing, and then also we cover Ohio State, who doesn't like the fact that he flipped 6 months into his commitment here. And it's like, oh, maybe he's not that good. No, I think he's a really good quarterback. He just needs to stop trying to act like Patrick Mahomes and just be Dylan Raiola and think teams will appreciate him more. But Bryce Underwood is a significant upgrade from whatever the heck they were putting out there at quarterback last year. And you mix that with, I think Justice Haynes is going to be the best running back at Michigan Ohio State has faced in the Ryan Day era. And that includes Hassan Haskins and Blake Corum and Donovan Peoples. Like, I think this is the best running back they've faced so far because he has both, I can keep things on schedule because I'm going to get 5 yards regardless. But then also you combine that with at any moment he can have a 65-yard run in him. And Bryce Underwood being more of a runner, I think makes Justice Haynes that much more of a threat because you now have to honor Bryce Underwood, which I don't think they did a good job of establishing against Oklahoma, which is why outside of that long run for Justice Haynes, he was kind of mute. But if you're thinking Bryce might keep it, and we're still I'm not worried about the defensive tackle depth anymore, but I am still worried about their ability to stop the run up the middle of the field, and that's where Justice Haynes scares me.
And then the way that they use Bryce Underwood now, too, with his legs, like the touchdown run he had against Nebraska, I mean, he just goes right up the gut there. And you also throw in Jordan Marshall in the way that he looked. Like they've got a two-headed monster at running back, and they've also got a quarterback who can lower his shoulder and get you yards, with his legs. It's pretty scary to think about. And I think now that you're checking your phone here real quick, I think you're also finding out now that, speaking of scary to think about, Jeremiah Smith's brother is coming to Ohio State. So that's pretty good news.
Yeah, that was essentially like never going to not happen the moment he got an offer over the summer. They're not the same player, though. JJ is 6'4", 230. Angelo's like 5'9", 5'10". He's a safety or a DB. He's a really good DB, though. So don't like, this is not me downplaying Angelo, but it's just, yeah, man. The Smiths, sending everybody to Ohio State. Speaking of little brothers who might be joining their all-time great wide receivers at Ohio State, hey, Jed Harrison, what you doing? But yeah, that was intriguing to watch Justice Haynes. That's 2 games in a row where I felt like he does something very well that I'm also very worried about with Ohio State. And I don't want to have a moment in 2 months where I'm like, I told you if Ohio State doesn't fix this, Justice Haynes is going to run for 250 yards.
Well, yeah, I was literally just going to say, like, what would you put if Michigan? So here's the hypothetical: if Michigan beats Ohio State, it's because the team total rushing yards was what number? Because they ran for 290 yards against Nebraska. I think they could probably rush for less than 290 yards and beat Ohio State. But if Michigan beats Ohio State, I'm thinking Michigan ran for at least like 220 yards between Underwood and Marshall and Justice Haynes.
Yeah. In fact, yeah. Even when you add Jordan Marshall into this, I think they're very Donovan Peoples, Blake Corum coded, but I think this duo is better. And they play off of each other nicely because even Jordan Marshall, as 6 for 80. Nebraska couldn't stop the run to save their life. 190 yards on the ground. Come on, Nebraska. Stop the run. Is Sayan the best quarterback in the Big Ten?
I would lean yes. I think Fernando Mendoza definitely thrust himself into that conversation yesterday, the way that he played. I think Dante Moore is in that conversation. Drew Aller, I think we're going to know this weekend. Does he seriously want to be part of this conversation or not? I think it's too early to know that yet, just because of what Penn State's schedule has been. But if I were to pick someone, I would take Julian Sayin right now. I think he's the best. But I'm open to having a conversation. I'm not 100% sold on it, because there is. I will say what we say about Drew Aller and kind of how they haven't been tested yet. We haven't really had to see it yet.
Yeah.
Well, he did beat Texas. I think we can admit that Julian was not necessarily tested. He was going up against a tough defense. Yeah, in that sense. But Ohio State's saying we could have put more on his plate. I mean, James Franklin can get in front of a microphone and say, hey, we're ready to put more on Drew Aller's plate. Dan Lanning can say the same about his quarterback. Kurt Signetti can say the same about, they can say whatever they want to say. You got to do it at some point. So I think I'm holding some reservations just because I want to see Julian with more on his plate against a quality opponent. But that said, I mean, the thing I always go back to is that accuracy regardless on who's on the other side of the line of scrimmage.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very confident that Julian Sink could put the ball wherever it's got to go. And then, you give him these receivers, that helps. But I think that accuracy could translate to, any other team in the Big Ten. So, yeah, I'd take Julian Sayin right now, number one out of the Big Ten quarterbacks. But I'm very open to the idea of having a conversation, in a couple weeks.
I think he's the best quarterback in the Big Ten. But I think Mendoza, I think Dylan Raiola, I think Dante Moore right now, as people are listening to this on September 22nd, and we're recording this at 9 o'clock at night on September 21st. I think right now the conversation starts with Sayin, Raiola, Dante Moore, and Fernando Mendoza. Yeah. I think that Bryce Underwood can join the conversation later in the year, but I need to see him be the reason they win a football game, though, which is what we're saying about Julian as well. And I think the difference is Ohio State's entire offensive scheme is kind of built around its quarterback being one of the reasons it wins a football game. Michigan's isn't. So that one's a little, I think, harder for Bryce to be able to accomplish. But Julian might have this accomplished by 7 days from now. We're going to be doing this pod and be going, okay, Julian Sayin did X, Y, and Z, and this is why we said he was the best quarterback. I think he's the best quarterback in the Big Ten. But Mendoza, Raiola, Moore are part of that conversation. I think Jaden Maeva is part of that. First of all, was USC's win over Michigan State enough to make you believe in Lincoln Riley this year?
No.
Okay.
No?
Cool.
There might be a question mark at the end of that, but I think the answer is no. I'm open to this USC team being okay. That game, Michigan USC is suddenly a massive game in the Big Ten schedule. So I think the winner of that's in the playoff conversation.
Did you lose enough respect for Illinois that even this upcoming weekend, USC can't do enough to make you believe in Lincoln Riley? Or can this game make you believe in it a little bit more?
If USC wins at Illinois, I'll believe it a bit more. Yeah, because I think in order to beat this Illinois team, you just have to be better at the line of scrimmage, and that's where Lincoln Riley's USC teams haven't been great. So if they can take advantage of a team that's weak in the trenches right now, I'll believe in Lincoln Riley a bit more.
Which team fears you the most? And these are teams that are on the schedule. Washington, Penn State, or Michigan. In fact, give me your order. Most fear, least amount of fear, and give me why.
Michigan's number one because I maintain that, the rivalry is what it is. And until Ohio State gets over that hump, it's hard to believe in Ryan Day and Ohio State to pull it off. So Michigan, number one. And even for football reasons, I think what we were just talking about, the running game that Michigan has, that is scary to think about. So I'll go them number one. The Penn State thing comes down to how much do you believe in James Franklin? And regardless of how good Penn State is, do you trust them to win at Ohio State? I will take into account environment as well, and that's why I'll put Washington number two. And playing at Michigan is also another reason why that's at number one. I'll put at Washington number two because, Julian Sand hasn't played football in 2 weeks, and now he's going to go into an environment that he's never played in before. That's not easy to do. And they're coming off a big win in the Apple Cup, and Damon Williams looks legit, and they're riding a high. And so I'll put Washington number two and Penn State at number three.
If all three of these games were on the road, I would still have Penn State number three. If all three of these games were at home, I would have Penn State number three. I think the only way I would not have Penn State at home, I think the only way I would not have Penn State at number three is if it was the only one of the three that was at home. The only one of the three that wasn't at home. If they were playing at Penn State and then at home against Michigan and Washington, I'd have Washington number three. And some of it is I know we joke about James Franklin, but some of that is literally just that. I feel that way about the Ryan Day Michigan thing. I have to feel that same way about James Franklin, and it comes to literally any big game, right? But it's also where you're at on the schedule. I mean, you just said it. It's not just a Julian Sand thing, right? Like Austin Saraveld's never been a starting left tackle on the road in a Big Ten game because that's not who they chose to start when Josh Simmons got hurt, and then they had another offensive line injury, right? Then Mahalski got hurt. They decided to move Donovan Jackson to left tackle and put Carson Hinsman in at guard. So he has never played as a starter in a Big Ten road game before. James Peoples and Bo Jackson, this is their first real big moment, especially because Bo Jackson didn't play a snap against Texas. So he's literally never played in a game against a team who has even close to like-minded talent. We think this secondary is very good. Okay, Jermaine, you have a chance to earn some money on Saturday, right? Evan Sanchez has looked very good. I know he got that small role against Texas, and okay, let's continue to build on that. He's still an 18-year-old freshman figuring this out for the first time, and he has to figure that out against Washington for the first time, right? Arvell Reese has looked awesome. Washington also has 3 games worth of film on Arvell Reese to go, okay, this is how they're planning to combat Damon Williams. What is Washington going to do to try to take Arvell Reese out of the game? Execution's been fine, but he hasn't been awesome. KD McDonald's been freaking amazing. Whoa. Jalen McClain's had a really good 3 games. Okay, this team has 3 games of film on you, so now they can start to scheme for that. And so that alone is what the fact that it's first and it's on the road is why it's second. Michigan is number 1 for me because it's Michigan. And yes, football reasons, they are still number 1 because their strength is potentially this defense's weakness offensively. I'm just not scared of James Franklin, man. They have outside of, let's take all the context away for a second of James Franklin's record in top 5 games, James Franklin's record against Ohio State since they won in 2016. All the other things, like the fact that the Ohio State defensive line just turns it up a notch every time they play against Penn State, whether it's Chase Young or it's Tommy Togiai or JT Tuimoloau and what he did, right? Let's take away all that. Let's take away the fact that Drew Aller doesn't have a true wide receiver weapon, even though they went out in the portal and got one. We just had a conversation not too long ago about who we think the best quarterback is in the Big Ten. And I don't think Drew Aller's name came out of either of our mouths. They've been I think we're going to talk about this later in the week, but Penn State's got to show me something this week against Oregon.
Oh, yeah.
I think coming into the season, Dan Lanning was going to have more to prove in that Penn State game than James Franklin was going to have to prove. And then Penn State's been kind of playing they're playing the way I thought Ohio State might play. Slow, methodical, Like, what are you doing? Right? You got crowned preseason champ of the Big Ten, and you're acting like you already won the trophy. You don't look good. I got doubts.
There's an interesting conversation. I think I'm going to write about this sometime soon for cleveland.com because it's become fascinating to me. Obviously, like, listen, Penn State could beat Oregon, Penn State could beat Ohio State, and we're having a conversation about how Penn State's good, and we knew they were going to be good, and we were being hypercritical of a few non-conference games where they were just playing with their food. Sure, that could happen, but you look at Illinois, you look at Clemson, these teams that had all this hype because of returning talent, veteran talent. That's fine. But I think we need to stop being so scared in the offseason of teams that have a ton of new, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I'll take new at Ohio State before I take experienced at Illinois or Clemson. Honestly, with the way that Cignetti's proven he can work the portal, I'll take new at Indiana over, experience at Illinois or Clemson. You know what I'm saying? Like, we have this, we do this thing every offseason where it's, I don't know, they're losing a lot. There's a lot to replace. Yeah, that's tough to do. But Ryan Day can replace whatever. With his staff and the way they coach, why do we get concerned instantly about new as compared to teams that have a ton returning? Would you rather be Clemson right now? Would you rather be Penn State even right now? Would you rather be Illinois right now? What are you gonna say?
With all your returning talent,
like congrats on a returning talent, but that was the whole thing with Illinois. It's like returning talent. Okay, I'll take Fernando Mendoza over Luke Altmaier.
But also, it's college football. Things get new a lot. That's kind of the point here is you're not supposed to be 28 playing college football. Like you roster turnover every 2 years is kind of normal. That's how this sort of works here. But also returning time. Okay, that just means they're going to be that means that they have the potential to do what they did last year. It doesn't mean they can do more all the time, right? Like
sometimes they do. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they take a step. That's fine.
Sure. Sometimes they do, but let's also be real about this. What Ohio State did last year with a lot of that returning talent was, from a regular season standpoint, no different than what they did the 2 previous years. They just had an expanded playoff, so they got a chance to kind of get up off the mat twice in a world where the 21, 22, and 23 teams didn't have a chance to get off the mat twice. So, sure, can Clemson run the table in the ACC and somehow get into the college football playoff? Probably, yeah. Am I going to bank on that based on what I've seen through 3 weeks? I'm definitely not going to do that. I have seen nothing so far from Penn State that suggests that they're going to kick it up a notch at some point. Everything I've seen from Penn State through 3 weeks is no different than what I've seen from Penn State the last couple of years. It's just right now they're sleepwalking, so it looks objectively worse in these types of games than it did last year. Oregon's got a brand new quarterback and some new receivers, and they look amazing. Indiana has a brand new transfer quarterback. They look amazing. Ohio State looks amazing. Michigan looks better. They just lost to a good Oklahoma team who, by the way, new quarterback. And they played against their old quarterback, and guess who looked better? So
new quarterback might win the Heisman. So
new quarterback might win the Heisman. Old quarterback can run and not actually throw the football. So yes, old is great, but this is not college basketball where you're trying to get old quickly. This is college football where you're trying to find your best 30 players and put them on the football field, packages and whatnot. Okay, so there's that. Let's take our final break, and then we've been doing this video for our YouTube channel, and we're going to incorporate it into the pod this week because we don't actually have 3 segments this week. It's hard when Ohio State didn't play football, and so the entire pod becomes a big picture conversation. So we're going to take our final break, and then we're going to shift into focusing on the week ahead with some questions we might have for Ohio State and on Ryan Day when we talk with him on Tuesday here on Buckeye Talk.
Hello, Nigel here. I couldn't help noticing that you're still awake. Now, I'm an owl. I'm supposed to be up at night, but you need your sleep. So if it's your allergy symptoms that are keeping you up, here's a word to the wise. Try Zysol. You see, Zysol works fast to relieve sneezing, runny nose, itchy watery eyes, and itchy nose and throat. And it keeps going strong for 24 hours, so you can get your sleep and wake up refreshed and ready for a productive day ahead. Be wise all. Take Zysol at night. Use as directed. Starts working in 45 minutes.
Vitamin Water Zero Sugar has great taste, zero BS, and obviously zero sugar. For those with zero room in their calendar, zero patience for slow walkers, those who get 0 hours of sleep on a Saturday night, have zero filter, zero given, and zero interest in grabbing a plain, boring water. Grab a delicious Vitamin Water Zero Sugar today.
2 big things. I'm Stephen Means, and that's Stefan Krajisnik, and this is the video version of Buckeye Talk. Unless you're actually listening to the full pod, then you're just listening. to the full pod. And if you're watching on YouTube, then go subscribe to Buckeye Talk and listen to that wherever you find podcasts. And get the text, 614-350-3315. This is where every single week Stefan and I come on and we talk about the things we're just thinking about as we talked to Ryan Day on Tuesday ahead of game weeks. And Ohio State's back on the field this Saturday to play Washington as Big Ten play is officially underway for Ohio State. Stefan, what are you thinking about asking Ryan Day on Tuesday?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is right now is, Lorenzo Styles' status and what Ohio State wants to do around that, right? And even if Lorenzo is playing, I think one of the big questions is how do you slow down what Washington has a slot receiver, right? And the talent that they have there with Boston and the things that they can do, to kind of to light up a defense, right? Washington's offense has looked good through 3 games and capped by their win in the Apple Cup. And Boston is a big reason for that. And the connection that him and Damon Williams have together is very explosive. So slowing down the run game and keeping Damon Williams contained is obviously going to be a big thing. But if Lorenzo Styles isn't playing, how do they want to go about that, right? Is it Jermaine moving into the slot and Devin Sanchez, getting a starting role? Is it Jermaine and and Davison staying where they are, and a guy like Bryce West gets some more playing time? Or, I don't think you're going to start and play Caleb Downs at the nickel like an entire game. But I think maybe that's something you incorporate a bit of, right? Maybe there's snaps every now and then where Caleb's the nickel and Malik Hartford's on the field with Jalen McClain at safety. There's a ton of different ways that they can do it. Obviously, if Lorenzo Styles is healthy and still has that starting spot, we'll see him at nickel the same way that we have, throughout the season. But I think the big question right now is what is his status, and whether he's playing or not, how do you address that? What do you do there? Because the play hasn't been, even when he's been healthy, it hasn't been pristine, right? Like we saw the big play against Ohio, right? And even if Lorenzo's healthy, do they maybe try to work around that and find different guys to put into the game, or find ways to get Devin Sanchez on the field more outside of just those dime packages? So Lorenzo's status, along with what they plan on doing as slot, frankly, I think could decide this game, let alone, be an important thing for Ohio State moving forward.
I feel like that's going to be a question mark even when Lorenzo gets back. Like, what do they do every week with that? Because they have the options. It's just figuring out what their best options are. Because the first thing, obviously, with Washington's passing attack is slowing down Denzel Boston. But when Denzel Boston and Washington has 3 games of film, how much are they moving Denzel Boston around, or is he just a guy who's sticking out at the outside receiver? One, yes, the status of Lorenzo's health, but then also, regardless of that, what do you want to do going forward? Because you're going to play some pretty good receivers in the next couple of weeks here, and that starts on Saturday. I'll go offense then. It wasn't even training wheels on the car against Texas. It was, don't even touch the steering wheel. Just sit there and make sure nothing goes crazy. And then they spent 2 weeks taking the training wheels off and letting him just throw it all over the yard, right? I think he's 9 for 9 on throws over 20 yards. And I think he's got a bulk of 40-yard plus touchdown passes this year. But again, you take it with a grain of salt given who the opponents are. Ryan Day admitted after the Texas game that they probably could have given Julian Sand more if they wanted to. They probably could have opened it up more. They didn't want to do it in that game because it wouldn't have been fair to him. But in hindsight, they probably could have done it. Okay, we're here now, right? Big Ten play is upon us. Are you ready to do it in a big game? Are you ready to do it against talented opponents? Are you ready to do it in Big Ten play? How much, now that you've gone from one extreme to the other, now you're back, you're centered now. You're playing a quality Big Ten opponent on the road. It's Julian Sand's first big moment where we're going to see the real Julian Sand in a game. Do you give him the keys and let him throw it around the yard, or do you try the ball control thing, right? How does Ohio State offensively want to approach this when you spent 2 weeks tinkering with your offense while knowing now, okay, Julian Sand can handle this if you want to hand him the keys? What does that look like with Julian Sand? How does that look? Why is it down the field passing threat? Is it intermediate throws behind the line of scrimmage? But we're here now. We both seem to think that Julian Sand is the best quarterback in the Big Ten. Okay, that can't be a hypothetical anymore. That needs to start proving itself week in and week out, because some of the other guys who he's in the conversation with have had opportunities to put their best case forward. Fernando Mendoza just did so against Illinois last weekend. Bryce Underwood had a quality game against Nebraska. Dylan Raiola, even a loss, had a quality game. Dante Moore has played against Oregon State and played against Oklahoma State, right? Julian Sand, we haven't seen the real Julian Sand against a quality opponent yet, and this is an opportunity to do so. So where is Ryan Day in the how much do you feel like Julian Sand can handle going into this game? How much faith do you have in him heading into this game? Because if you think this isn't going to be an offense that relies on its passing game first, then that needs to start to come alive on Saturday.
Yeah, I think this is the next step in Julian Saint's progression, is him playing on the road for a first time and having to do it in a way where he's being asked to do more than he had to do against Texas. I think it's a big step for Julian, and if you're going to be, because he's kind of like on this weird spot in the Heisman conversation where he's like, I think he's like maybe 6th, 7th in odds, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the guys ahead of him have all had like moments, right? Like Mendoza took a big jump because of the way he played against Illinois. John Mateer has taken jumps because of the ways he's played against Michigan and against Auburn and things of that nature. So like everyone's kind of waiting, like, all right, when is Julian going to have, for lack of a better term, kind of like a coming out party in terms of his Heisman hype and things of that nature. And this could be an opportunity for that. Put more on his plate. Let's see if he can handle it, right? And I think that's going to be a big test, especially with, if we still have some questions about Ohio State's running game, that makes, Julian Saint's production more and more important, right? Like he's got to do more and more, to make sure this passing game is pristine if there are some questions about the running game. So yeah, that is going to be, that is definitely going to be something to watch this week. So yeah, I'm excited to see what that looks like with more on his plate. And I should say, you're right. I said Denzel Boston was their slot guy. He's not their slot guy, but they have used him in slot at times. I think week 1 he had like 8 snaps in the slot. So I'm sure they're going to move him around a bit. But whoever you put as slot, if it ends up being Jermaine, then that makes Devin Sanchez's test on the outside, right, even more important, because now that's a freshman who's stepping in to a bigger role and going up against, one of the best receivers in the Big Ten. So, yes, I wanted to make sure I got that right so people weren't thinking, hey, why isn't Denzel Boston in the slot at all?
Z the whole time, they're like, what? You lied to me. You told me he was going to be in the slot. Now he's on the same side as the tight end. Have you ever been to Seattle?
I've not. First time.
Okay. First
the game
time
for Oregon was the first time I'd been to the Pacific Northwest last year.
Yeah, same. This time I'm not going to be dying because I didn't go to Japan the week before. So I'll hopefully enjoy this trip. I enjoyed Oregon. I'm not saying I didn't enjoy Oregon. The atmosphere was great. It's just hard to do that while you're also trying to, I got very sick last year because I was
trying to survive.
Just trying to survive.
One day at a time.
Yeah, it was literally one snap at a time. Okay, Luke has Merritt caught a pass. This time around, I'll get to enjoy it in its totality when we get out there. Get the text 614-350-3315. It's a 2-week free trial, $3.99. After that, and go listen to Buckeye Talk wherever you find podcasts. Unless you're already listening, then we appreciate you. And if you're watching, go listen to Buckeye Talk. We got a lot of fun stuff planned this week. We got a live show coming up. Ohio State back on the field on Saturday against Washington. It's the first time these two teams have played since the Rose Bowl in what was Urban Meyer's last game as the head coach before Ryan Day took over on January 1st, 2019. For Stefan Krajisnik, I'm Stephen Means. Talk to you guys later.